swear. My name is I'm a film critic, and I'm really honored to invite our guests onto the stage. Please first welcome Robert Aramayo. And please welcome writer, director, and producer Kirk Jones. Maybe Kirk, I can start with you. Tell us a little bit about meeting John Davidson, becoming aware of his story, and what compelled you to tell his life story in a movie.
I first became aware of John in 1989. There was a documentary on TV called John's Not Mad, and the reason that it was entitled that was that John was 14 years old and he was coming to terms with the onset of Tourette syndrome, very similar to what you saw tonight at the beginning of the movie. I was just really touched. I was emotionally engaged. I was fascinated by the condition. And there were another couple of documentaries over the years. And I think one of the things that drew me to the story, to John's story, was that I've always been fascinated in films by trying to mix humour and emotion at the same time. And I have questioned why I enjoy doing that, and someone once said, well, maybe that's because that's what life is like. You know, life is not just one big comedy or one dark tragedy. It's kind of a mix of everything. So I've always been interested in combining those two elements, and I think in John's story I saw the most kind of potent mix of humour and emotion. So I contacted him. I went up to Gala Shields, and that was the start of the journey for me.
And before I bring Robert in, I think we have a special guest in the audience.
Is it Connie? Like to say... Connie, okay, so we just wanted to say this evening we have a very special guest. Dottie's real sister is here, and is Connie. And she's got the front row. And she's got a badge which says, I'm the real Dottie's sister. So I just wanted to welcome you. So a special welcome. Thank you for coming. Oh, and a niece as well. Good. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you. Thank you. Robert, congratulations. An absolutely brilliant performance. I want to ask you, I guess, both how familiar were you with Tourette's? How much did you know about this condition? And what compelled you to play John, to tell his story?
I didn't know very much when I started. I'd say I just had sort of like a two-dimensional view of Tourette's, really. I didn't understand very much about it. And then I just sort of received the script and thought it was an interesting script, and then I watched Kirk's first film, Waking the Divine, which I absolutely love. So I was just excited to Zoom with him and to chat about it. And then I got really excited because I felt like there was the combination of him and the script was really interesting. And very quickly then I met John. We went to Edinburgh and then down to Gala Shields and met with John, and I don't know, I feel like once you've met John, it's hard not to want to, be involved in the project, because he's just such an amazing man, and he's got such, energy about him, and so I was really excited to be a part of it after I met John.
Thank you. And Kirk, you said something really, relevant to this movie about the humor that's in the story next to the drama. I love the humor in this movie. I love that we're allowed to laugh in certain moments, but the humor is never at the expense of John or condition. It's really parsed and navigated very sensitively, both on the page and in your performance. So I was wondering if both of you could say a little bit about navigating humor. What was the most important thing to get right there?
I think when I first met John, I think almost one of the first things I said was, if I say that I can identify a level of humour within the condition, would that upset you, annoy you, frustrate you? He said, no. He said, my life has been the most tragic and the most comical all at the same time. He said, that's what Tourette's is. It's all wrapped up in one. And he literally said, if we didn't have those lighter moments where we could laugh at the things that come out of us, which we have no idea, when John doesn't know what he's going to say basically until it leaves his lips, and sometimes it entertains even him when he listens to himself. So I knew that humour was acceptable. One of the things he did say very early on was that the Tourette's community historically feel as if they had not really been given very much respect, and they had often been invited to go on TV shows or radio or talk to the press, or even been presented in dramas or made jokes about with comedians and things on TV, and they were always treated as a joke. They were always treated as a bit of a gimmick that people would laugh at. So I said very early on, I said, that isn't what I have in mind. I promise you, I want to deliver a realistic, believable, condition and story, so that you will. I want to make a film that you will be proud of, and that the Tourette's community will be proud of. So he was very relieved to hear that, but I was aware that I wanted to go a step further. I wanted to really kind of gain his confidence, and I said, I'm going to make you an executive producer, and that means that you will have a voice and you will have an opinion, and I will show you the script every 20 pages. You tell me if I've got anything wrong, if anything upsets you. And that's what we did, not just with the script, but even with locations and then casting. And Rob and I went to see him, and I effectively was saying to John, this is who is going to be playing you, and John was really happy. Dottie was very happy that Maxine Peake was playing her. And then I showed John the final cut, I showed him the final film, and he was absolutely thrilled. And I think if any of us on the crew, cast, production, crew, could have been asked what their goal was really from this project, it would be number one, to make John proud and to do justice to his story. Number two, to make the Tourette's community proud. And then beyond that, anything else was really a bonus.
Thank you.
And yeah, I'll just say that like I also feel like it's in terms of humour, it's I think a good example of this is like it's like the tick's not the funny thing, it's or not the it's the way people respond to the tick, you know what I mean? So like, I mean, in terms of on the humorous side, it's like that's what I think Mullan does really well. It's like in that interview, it's not the tick that's funny, it's what it's the effect that it's having on Peter, you know what I mean? I think that and it goes for bad circumstances as well as good circumstances. It's the people around the person who's ticking that define sort of what it is, I think.
And could you, Robert, maybe talk a little bit about collaborating with John in crafting the performance? How did the two of you work together, and how much freedom did you have? Maybe in addition to that, what other research did you do to really understand the condition and reflect it in your performance?
Yeah. Well, I met John really early on, and then after that initial meeting, then I went away for like a month, and I just learned as much as I could. I watched documentaries, I read books about triggers, anything that I could get my hands on. John's documentaries, other documentaries, YouTube videos, I started Zooming people then who live with Tourette's, especially in Scotland. And then when I got back to Scotland, I based myself in Galashiels and spent loads of time with John, but also travelled throughout Scotland meeting different people, because I wanted to gain, first of all, I wanted to just gain as much knowledge and understanding of Tourette's as I could, and then obviously really focus on spending time with John. And John taught me a lot about Tourette's, but obviously what was more important was just hanging out with him, seeing his daily life, going, seeing that walk he likes to go on, and why it's, why he likes doing it, just spending as much time with him as I could and not trying to get on his nerves.
Thank you. I love the structure of the film, Kirk. I love that you start and end with the Queen scene. It's almost like this framing device, and it's also a really light scene that kind of cues us in about the tone of the movie, eases us into the story. Tell me a little bit about why you chose that structure.
Initially, I listened to John, I spent days with John, and I ordered everything that he told me. So that meant that at the beginning of the script originally, or the beginning of the document, I was focused just on young John. And the MBE scene with the Queen was obviously about 80% of the way through the movie. And then as I kept looking at it, I thought, I really want the audience to understand that they can laugh. And you know, we live in an interesting time where sometimes people are nervous, they're not sure whether they should trust their own instinct or not, and they understand that this is a film about a neurological condition, and I just didn't want the beginning of the film to be kind of too dark, and I thought, well, how about if I take the MBE scene from 3/4 of the way through the film, put it at the beginning, because I knew, I was confident that people would understand that that was a funny scene. And it was a funny scene because, you know, I think if you look at the elements of what makes it funny, no one got hurt, no one was harmed. John was in a room where people were understanding. In fact, the real story is that one of the guards came up to John after he shouted out. He put his hand on his shoulder and he said, "Don't worry, John, the Queen understands." And so I felt it was a safe scene to start the movie with, but I also hoped that the audience would laugh immediately. And they were laughing with John, and they were laughing at the environment and the situation. So that's really why I wanted to start there, almost to warm up the audience, and then we start to go into the real story.
Thank you. There are so many scenes that I want to bring up, but one of them comes to mind in particular right now that shows us Tourette's, maybe that two-dimensional knowledge that you were referring to that a lot of us might have before, isn't only about verbal tics and swears, but sometimes things that you can't stop yourself from doing, like the scene where you're running your finger through hot water when you're making tea. So tell me a little bit about the significance of those moments. Why was it important for you to include it, and what was it like to be in those moments?
Yeah, that's really cool. We learned that Tourette's rarely exists on its own, and that there's co-occurring conditions usually alongside Tourette's, and John has OCD, and sometimes as well with John, the OCD can affect his Tourette's as well. It sort of the two things sort of are together. So you know, when we were just, it was one of those things really that the lamppost is a similar thing. It was, you know, just sort of, there were stories that were coming out of John and things that were important for him to include in terms of portraying accurately his story, right?
Yeah, so you know, we got to a stage where I'd done a lot of work with John, but then I moved on to pre-production with the film, and that was about 3 months before we started filming, and that was the point at which Rob arrived and really started to get deep into his research, his reading, speaking to people, and we would often speak, maybe every other night, usually in the evening, and Rob would just say, "I learned something today, and I learned this, or I learned that," and of course, if he passed it on to me, Rob always felt really passionately that we should include as many details of the condition as possible. So he would present information to me, essentially saying, "I think we should get this in, because if we're going to tell the story." So I'd take that on, and the lamppost is a perfect one. He said, one evening he said, "Did you know that John kissed lampposts?" I said, "I had no idea." No, he said, "No, he told me today." He said, "If they're not straight, if they're not the right colour, if they're slightly out of order, he has to go and kiss them." So of course, as soon as he tells, I mean, that's a you know, a really visual and a really interesting and a really informative scene that should go in the film. So I would just slot it in, you know, there were many occasions like that. I mean, what Rob and I have learned now is that no one who has Tourette's has the same condition. It's, if you meet one person with Tourette's, you've only ever met one person with Tourette's. Everyone's different. John in particular has OCD, as Rob's just mentioned, Tourette's, a level of autism, ADHD, and high anxiety. And he has like a complete mix of those. So it's very difficult to define his condition. And that's why I think it was such an admirable job for Rob to really get under the skin of that, because he wasn't getting under the skin of someone, for example, who had tics. He was getting under the skin of someone who had tics, OCD, ADHD, autism, really high anxiety. So it was a really complex mix, as it is with most people who have any form of Tourette's.
Thank you. And Robert, can you talk a little bit about your co-stars, Peter Mullan and Maxine Peake? They play two people who obviously had a lot of impact on John's life. What was it like to build that beautiful camaraderie that we see on the screen?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I mean, I don't know, it was like, at the beginning with both of them, it's like so intimidating because they're legends, you know? They're like, but you know, I really, really enjoyed working with both of them, and the collaboration with Peter was really interesting, because he, I don't know, he just sort of like brought something to that interview. I think they're both the way that they play them is really different. It's like, you know, we see the first meetings of both of them, and it's quite different. It's just sort of like absolute acceptance from Dottie, and then Tommy's a bit sort of like, it's going to take me minutes to get my head around this, you know, and I thought that was like they just brought those two dynamics really, really easily. But for me as an actor, I just felt like, wow, I'm so lucky, you know. Everyone I worked with was amazing. But you know, Dottie is like, as you know, as people know, it's, you know, Dottie's a really amazing woman, and I absolutely love her. And so like when I learned that Maxine was playing it, it's like, you know, it's very fitting because she brings such warmth so naturally. You know.
I also want to bring up another co-star of yours, Andrea Bissett, who is the young woman with Tourette's, and I believe she really has Tourette's. So that's a really, really gorgeous scene, probably my favorite in the film, where it really puts in perspective how lonely this condition can be. What was it like for you to be in that moment, to act that with Andrea, and what was it like to cast her in this part? And as I understand, there were other people on set living with Tourette's, about 30 so crew members.
Yeah, not so much crew members, but the cast in total was 90 actors, and 30 of them had Tourette's.
Oh.
So I was really keen, and Rob was really keen, and John was really keen that we involved the community totally. Andrea is just an extraordinary find. She was one of those 30, but of course she had a more significant role in the film. My wife had spotted her on a YouTube video, and she was about the right age for the person we were looking for. She was Scottish. She just seemed like a lovely girl, so I managed to meet her and introduced her later on to Rob. And you know, they spent a lot of time together. I know they had a really sort of close working relationship outside of the film, and I think that paid off when they came together. I mean, there's two scenes really that kind of go together, which the first one is in the back of the car, where, you know, they're ticking off of each other, and that rolls into the beautiful scene, maybe my favourite scene as well, where they're sat talking in the back of the community centre. But I know Rob had really enjoyed that relationship and acting with her.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like one of those like really magical moments that that don't come around very often. That particular scene, where I don't think we did many takes because it was just like we both had the script, but there was like a level of improv as well in that scene that was going on, and we just sort of like, it really did feel like we were pulling up a couple of chairs, and we just sort of like, let's give it a go now. And it was, Kirk had set the camera like over there somewhere, and then we just, I don't know, just really felt like she's brilliant, you know, she's such a brilliant actor, and she just sort of like just started talking to me, you know, and it was so natural, and yeah, I was like, wow, God, she's amazing, you know, yes, it was a really, really awesome experience with Andrea.
Thank you. It's really a lovely scene. Do I have time for one more? That's really exciting. I also want to ask you, Robert, you know, of course, getting John's condition right and what this condition does to him right is one part of acting, but Tourette's is only one side of John. There are so many other qualities about John that you capture so beautifully. What was most important for you to get right about this really lovely person that we get to meet?
I mean, that really, it's the warmth. He's got such warmth in him, you know, like he's got a massive, you know, heart, and you know, he's a really empathetic man. I think that's key. I think it's central to John. I think there's a lot of like, he's just a really healthy person, you know. And that's what I feel like when I'm around John. He's full of life, and you know, he's curious and interested, and really passionate about sharing his experiences and his knowledge and stuff. And obviously, towards the end of that film, it was important to make sure that was there. But like throughout the whole thing, really, I just think it's his warmth and yeah.
Thank you. And Kirk, can you talk a little bit about the soundtrack that you assembled? There are some really beautiful, legendary needle drops throughout. What drove you to choose these tracks?
Well, first of all, I was aware that we were going for like 1983 up until, I think it was 87, 88. But I was really aware that we were, telling a big story from when John was 14 up until when he was, in his early 50s. And I wanted to kind of pepper the whole film with tracks which belonged to that period. So we were kind of telling a story with the music as well. And it didn't hurt, of course, that I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And so I was very familiar with a lot of those kind of classic tracks. And we were very fortunate to have an amazing music supervisor called Kristen Lane, and it was her job to approach all of these people and try and get the music for a small amount of money as possible, because we were a very, very low budget film. So she did an amazing job, including getting the final track, which was from Oasis.
Yeah.
So she did great there. Yeah.
Maybe as a parting note, you can leave us on something educational about Tourette, because I feel like, even though obviously this is not newly talked about, but people are learning more and more about this condition every day. What is something that both of you, after spending so much time researching this condition, portraying this condition, you want people to consider, to keep in mind while they meet someone with Tourette's or talk about Tourette's? What are some of the things that we should all be mindful of and remember?
I just want to say that I learned some statistics recently about the US, which I thought was really interesting, which is that 1 in 50 people live with a persistent tic disorder, 1 in 50 kids, and 1 in 160 kids live with Tourette's, and 50% live undiagnosed as well with Tourette's. And so like that just, I don't know, like that's just eye-opening to me. It's like, I met with there's an amazing charity out here called the Tourette's Association of America, and I met with them the other day, and they were saying like, there's still so much more work to be done, because I think you meet a lot of people who think, I've never met anybody who lives with Tourette's, but the chances are that you have, because it's not, it's like what, it's not always, obviously coprolalia is a tic, shouting and swearing, and that's what we sort of associate as Tourette's, but there's tics you don't see, there's tics that you maybe don't think are tics, and stuff. So I just feel like maybe it sort of speaks to, maybe Kirk can speak to this, just sort of like having an open mind and about all neurodiversity, I suppose. But I thought those statistics were really interesting.
Thank you.
And just two really brief things that I was told, I think from John or someone in the community, was the first thing was ignore the tics, but not the person. And I think probably all of us have that kind of weakness, that if we see someone who we feel is not the same as us, or is maybe behaving in a way which is slightly different to us, the easiest thing is to just ignore them. And actually, you're ignoring a real person, so don't fall into that trap of ignoring them completely. Ignore the tic, but not the person. And then finally, I was told by someone, just remember that your normal is not necessarily the same as everybody else's normal. And I thought that was really interesting as well. We all assume that everyone's the same as us, but there are people who are really, really struggling with many, many issues, most of them not visible at the time. So that was something I remembered.
Thank you so much for this absolutely
Thank you very much. Thank you, Connie.